Hello, 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 and welcome to the Breaking Bias Summit. And today I am just so thrilled, delighted, and honored to welcome one of my dear, dear friends and sisters on this path, someone I've known for over 15 years. I've seen her grow, I've seen myself grow with her, and we've just been there for each other for so long. Her name is Ananta Ripa Ajmera, and she's a spiritual teacher, award-winning and best-selling author of The Way of the Goddess and the Ayurveda Way, and co-founder of the Ancient Way, a really, really exciting organization that supports people through various aspects of spirituality, Ayurveda, yoga, Vedanta, and all the things that Ananta stands for. All of her programs are really rooted in ancient Indian philosophy, particularly Ayurveda, yoga, and Vedanta. And she studied these ancient technologies for over 15 years in an oral lineage that stems back to ancient India. So we have someone who may appear young and youthful, but someone who's deeply, deeply wise. She also serves as an advisor of Ayurveda at The Well, a modern wellness club in New York City. And she's the host of True to Yourself podcast and has taught trainings at so many different organizations, from Stanford Medical School to Global Sisterhood to California Department of Public Health, among many, many other things. So you can read about her, of course, on your own. But at this point, I'd love to welcome you, Ananta, and thank you so much for saying yes to being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight and pleasure to connect with you always.
Yeah. So, one of my intentions around hosting this summit is really to welcome people who've been part of my own journey around breaking bias and who've really inspired me. And you've always been one of those people, since the time I began doing this work like 10 years ago. And as you reflect on our world today, how do you feel about bias in our society? Any personal experiences or somatic experiences that arise for you when you think about this word bias?
Okay, I'm going to preface this by saying I might be a bit biased because I have taken your trainings because I sincerely feel
Yeah.
something that can be overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful, right? Because the way you feel about it is really that, oh, it's something we can overcome. It's beautiful. And connecting that to when we kind of and you're an expert at this as a practitioner of yoga and Ayurveda, this feeling world of a world without bias. What do you see? What visions do you have as we imagine this world where, belonging truly replaces bias?
The vision that comes to me is actually one I came across while doing the rebranding of my organization, The Ancient Way. We were looking for an image that conveyed this sense of unity and belonging. And what came was hands of different colors, different shapes and sizes that are in a circle on the trunk of a tree with the sun
Mm,
shining down.
that's so beautiful, because it's not just about human beings, but really connecting our humanity with the living world, right? The trunk of a tree.
Yes, exactly, because a tree represents wisdom and ancient wisdom, right? Because trees take so long to grow, to take root, to give their branches and their fruits and their flowers. Every
Yeah.
part of their development is a process, right? And yet
Yeah.
they are a whole ecosystem unto themselves, and they are a provider of refuge and a giver of shade. And they
Mm,
support all living beings, not just human beings, but animals as well, and
yeah.
plants.
That's such a beautiful image. And, when I think about this concept of breaking bias, it's really about breaking those biases, right, that we have that are so like human centric, to really expanding to the living world, to all beings. Um, and, having witnessed your journey for now 15 years, one of the things that have really inspired me is that you've broken so many biases within yourself. And the first one that really comes to me is that you were a student of business. You went to Stern School of Business. um, that's when we met, and at NYU. And after college, you adopted a almost like a monastic lifestyle.
Hmm.
So, coming from a school that really kind of, what's the word, that propagates materialism, that propagates, you know, a lifestyle that's, you know, driven by capitalism and money. I'm not saying those things aren't important, they are for livelihood, but you chose a very different path. So I'd love to learn more about how that came to be and why this work was so important to you that you chose a very different way to um, not just secure a livelihood, but how to be in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's such an interesting first glimpse, and it's hard to even remember that I did that, like it doesn't even come in my bio anymore that Ananta went to business school. It's like, what? Like I did? I feel like I still have so much to learn about business, now that I have my own organization. I'm like, okay, like but things have evolved a lot since those days when I went to
Yeah.
school to study. Um, I think this path honestly chose me. And even while I was studying at NYU, I got really drawn into yoga just for personal stress relieving survival instincts initially, right? Because living in the city for the first time after coming from the suburbs of Toledo, Ohio, it was very stressful being a
Um,
city girl in a stressful, competitive college environment that honestly I didn't fully choose. It was my dad who thought it would be a great idea
mm,
for me to go to business school. And in some sense, it was his projection of his dream onto me. I remember when I got accepted and I had some little backpack that they must have sent from the Stern Business School. My dad put it on and was walking around like so excited, as if he were embarking on this adventure.
mm,
I had the vision always that I would want to be of service in some way. And I thought that might be being like Mother Teresa or starting a nonprofit or being an executive director for something like American Red Cross. And my dad only saw the business aspect of it. He's like, well, if you want to do that, then still having a business background would be helpful. And I guess
mm,
that convinced me to just go for it and end up, studying. But then this spiritual bug got bitten. As soon as I stepped into the yoga classroom here,
mm,
I was exposed to all the same sounds and smells of incense that I grew up with as an Indian who went to the Hindu temple, even though technically our religious background is Jain. So it just made me go back to childhood, and it was so odd and yet so home-like to
yeah.
come to that New York City yoga school and hear a lot of non-Indian people chanting these mantras that I grew up with, but actually explaining them in a way that I could better understand them. And so
Yeah.
I thought I was going for stress management. I actually got led on a really deep journey that
Mm,
inspired me to investigate the roots of yoga in India itself and to go back to India as a college student after not having gone for all of my teenage years. And
mm,
when I went to India, I found that there was such a beautiful integration of spirituality with service, with social entrepreneurship. And I just kept going back during college and then even after college. And somewhere midway through, after I started the yoga journey, I was like, gosh, I wish I would have gone to school to study yoga, like to get a PhD in yoga or something spiritually related, because that really fills me with so much peace and joy. Whereas statistics, finance, accounting just made me not feel anything, just made
mm,
myself feel like I was selling my soul somehow to some outside entity. And so I just decided after working in a corporate job for 6 months or so after I graduated from college that I need to just go on an adventure. I need to follow this bite that I have to know who I am. I need to also go through some kind of a transformative journey. I don't even know what that means, but I
Mm,
feel that I need to do that. And so
mm,
I decided to embark on a 6-month journey to get my yoga teacher training certificate in South India. And then I volunteered teaching yoga to children in Indian schools, universities, and things like that. And I found a lot of peace and purpose in that. I think I really loved the yoga teacher training because we got to live an Ayurveda lifestyle in harmony with nature. It was amazing to wake up to the sound of lions roaring across the
oh
pond
wow,
where we were in the
wow,
early hours before the sun had even risen.
my
And I
goodness.
just, yeah, I think the seed got planted during that training that how do I eat this way and feel this way all the time? And then the
Mm,
answer to that became Ayurveda. And I actually moved from New York, which was very, materialistic and fast, to California, which I felt called to in India because it seemed to resemble India a little bit more in the slower pace and the more prevalent emphasis on spirituality there.
mm,
Going through a meditation community to then become a part of that. And then from there, got led actually to Ayurveda as the sister science of yoga and the
mm,
science of all aspects of holistic and healthy eating and living, and really experiencing the benefit of yoga in all aspects of life.
wow.
I started studying then with a traditional teacher from a lineage, and I was like, okay, at first I went just because I wanted to learn how to eat. I wanted to learn how to take care of more immediate health problems, right? Like I had a lot of trouble sleeping, I had
Yeah.
stomach aches, I had suffered from eating disorders for a long time when I was a teenager. And I always tried to self-diagnose it, like going to the library, reading a bunch of books about eating disorders, what causes them, and I
Mm,
online forums, I talked to therapists, I then obviously did yoga, I did the long meditation retreats in India when I was there, and everything gave some partial solution, but I
right.
felt that there was still something missing, and I wasn't sure what that was until I encountered Ayurveda and I felt finally seen for all of who I am. And I
Yeah.
especially loved that Ayurveda doesn't put labels on us, whereas we can label ourselves, right? That I'm
Mm,
an insomniac, I'm an anorexic, I'm
yeah.
uncomfortable, I'm angry, I'm stressed, I'm whatever. We put all these labels on ourselves. And here then was this ancient system which was saying, actually, the first problem that you have is you're wrongly identifying who you are as something related to this transient body or the
Yeah.
constantly changing mind. And
Yeah.
so why don't we first correct your identification with that which is unchanging and
Yeah.
eternal? And
Can you
that,
describe for us what exactly is Ayurveda for those viewers and listeners that may not be familiar with it?
sure, yeah. Ayurveda is the world's oldest system of health and healing. It's a holistic system of healing that is the sister science of yoga. So it teaches you all aspects of how to prevent disease and really promote radiant health and quality of life.
That's incredible. And how old is the system, if approximately, if
I
you
would
know?
say at least 5,000 years. I mean,
Wow.
it's considered eternal, right? So it's
Yeah.
like oral wisdom that's passed on from generation to generation, but at some point they did record the wisdom into texts.
Text, right? But it's really something that translates into how we are as beings, right?
Yeah, and it's withstood the test of time. It's even
Yeah.
withstood the all of the many takeovers of the Indian country by foreign
Yeah.
leaders, right? So that's
Yeah.
saying something that there were people brave enough to hold on to it, even in the face of colonialism and oppression.
Yeah. So you basically became, an Ayurveda practitioner. You consult with folks. You're, of course, at the Well and were their director of Ayurveda. So, what does Ayurveda have to teach us today, when it comes to, just so many mental afflictions that, you know, are afflicting, I guess, our communities and even our beings, from mental illness to anger to hatred. So, from an Ayurvedic perspective, how is this toolkit something that we can really, learn from?
Yeah, and it's nice because it's a multi-pronged approach and answer where there are certain physiological inputs that we can actually reduce in order to not feel so angry and to not
Yeah,
so stressed, right? So even the food that we eat and the kind of environment that we expose ourselves, the type of people we talk to, the kind of media that we consume, all of
mm,
the sensory inputs that we receive are actually considered in terms of identifying the root causes of why we're having certain mental afflictions. That's
yes,
something you don't really find in other medical models, even in the integrative system. I obviously work with a lot of different healers and doctors of different modalities and traditions. But for sure, we're, I think, the only one that really considers what are you taking in through your five senses as a really important question to be able to
mm,
address where is this coming from.
yes,
And then there's obviously also very much deeper karmic reasons why we have certain issues, right? That go deeper than the surface, where you can take care of all the physiological things, you can do all of the fire balancing diet
right,
that will calm the anger, right? And
yeah,
get yourself into a feeling of a peaceful environment and take care of your surroundings, be with great people, but still be afflicted with something deep rooted. And for certain things, Ayurveda texts even say it's due to the seeds of karma, which are rooted in something beyond even this birth that are there for us to really deal with. But what's so cool about Ayurveda is that it's saying not only do you look at your five sensory inputs and your food and your environment and your karma, right? But if you want to solve it, then the way to do so is actually service.
yeah,
And they write
yeah,
that in the texts that selfless service is really
mhm.
the antidote to karmic afflictions.
Yeah, and intent is so important there, right? Because oftentimes we think that, oh, we'll go to the soup kitchen or I'll donate some money, but with an expectation of return of some sort, right?
Right, right,
But
right.
here we're talking about really purity of intent to really alleviate suffering, to be of service, to, give our efforts, our time, our energy, direct our energy toward alleviation of suffering, right?
Exactly. And that's what's so beautiful about the spirituality that is informing Ayurveda and even yoga as its sister science, because
Mhm.
we have this whole practice and philosophy of karma yoga,
Yeah,
where we're taught that we do actions for their own sake
yes,
and without any attachment or expectation of anything in return. So when they're saying to do selfless service, what that really means is that we don't have any desire that's going into the action. Most
yeah,
actions are desire ridden. We want something out of it, either for ourselves or
yeah,
unselfishly for someone else. But just the fact that we have a desire underlying our actions, even if it's really noble, even if it's to be like Mother Teresa and to help so many people, it's still going to potentially cause us suffering, which can come in
yeah,
the form of all these mental afflictions. So it's
yeah,
only until we transcend the desires to really do the selfless actions, which
mm,
means going back to nature, being like the sun, because the sun shines irrespective of
mm,
whether it's being applauded or not, of on people, whether they're this color skin, that color skin, whatever gender. It doesn't discriminate, right? It's
yeah.
is to shine, and so shine does, and that's what
Mhm.
we're really being taught to do as seekers on the path. And ultimately, Ayurveda is a holistic health system that's teaching us how to
Yeah,
live in alignment with nature at this really, really deep level, because nature ultimately has the answers for
yeah.
us.
It's so beautiful, Ananta. Thank you for sharing that. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is that as someone who's such a deep practitioner of these systems, right, of yoga, Vedanta, and Ayurveda, um, and someone of, Indian heritage. Of course, you were born and raised in the U.S., but of course, you carry that lineage within you. How have you, managed yourself within yourself, like the commodification of a lot of these ancient tools, by a lot of forces that oftentimes aren't generally deeply rooted in these traditions, but are also seeking to, again, the intent is to get some sort of a monetary return. And oftentimes they cause harm because the intent is impure. And
Right.
then also, as someone of, who holds this tradition, when you receive, you know, projections toward you as
Mhm.
woo woo, as unscientific, because it hasn't been accepted by the Western Academy. So there's like that internalized piece and then that interpersonal piece.
Mhm.
How have these tools supported you in reconciling or reintegrating that without getting, oftentimes in South Asian circles, there's a lot of anger and cancel culture that kind of bleeds in. But
Yeah.
I haven't seen you do that at all. So it's quite unique for you. So I was curious to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny because I get this question so much by even
You're a
media.
pro now, then.
Like, yeah, I get so many media asking, "What about cultural appropriation of yoga
Yes.
and Ayurveda?" And they're like trying to get it out of me, right? Like, was there a time when you saw that this was being projected in a way that wasn't true to the tradition? And where was it? And I'm like, look,
Yeah.
I'm not here to point fingers at people and to
Mm,
blame people, because anytime we point a finger at someone else, there's always three fingers pointing back at us.
yes.
I've just really taken this as a responsibility to be the change, right? And to be the full expression of the benefit of going to the depth of a tradition. And
Yeah.
because I have done that, because I've really sat at the feet of the ancient masters, right? Like the people who carry these ancient traditions from the source, from India, and have read the ancient texts and continue to study them, I feel that the best way I can approach this issue is simply by being the change and showing people and telling people, when asked, only when asked, that you're missing a greater benefit by
Yeah.
not knowing the depth of the practice, because
Yeah.
abundance and spirituality are not conflicting. A lot of times we have this idea that if you want to be spiritual, you can't be abundant. You can, but you will be a lot more discerning on the choices that lead to that abundance. It may take more time, it
Yeah.
may take more planning, it may take more thought and effort, but when we have the abundance, we're able to give that abundance, right? So whenever we're generous, whenever we are giving without strings attached, we're always going to receive that back if we really
Yeah.
understand the law of karma, right? So if I
Yeah.
plant seeds of anger and pointing fingers at people, then what do I think is going to happen to me? Like, I'm going to get canceled, right? Like, other people to
Yes.
do the same to me. But if I'm saying, hey, let's go beyond this paradigm and let's just be
Mm,
liberated and be truly happy within for no external reason, then I can invite people to meet me at that level where genuine
yeah.
spirituality happens. And I just believe that the best way to transmit spiritual teachings is through practicing spirituality at every step, right? And if
Yeah.
we
Compassion,
yeah,
empathy, understanding.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, because people are only projecting because they don't know any better. And so my
Exactly.
responsibility as a teacher is to show them something higher, right? Something
Yeah.
better, something that is going to be uplifting, not from an inferiority or superiority standpoint, but simply, our actions should be what inspires people, right? It's
Mhm.
not about the words we say, but it's about who we are and also what we do that should make people feel attracted to a certain path and to taking those actions themselves, right? So the more joy we put into our life and into our work and into, connecting with people, I feel the more we can really be the change we wish to see. And then
Yeah.
as for the lack of the studies to prove or validate the system, I feel it's the same thing, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, well, this has been around since before even these calculating systems have been around. So that
Yeah.
speaks for itself. But
Right.
we can always, if you are interested in that, right, then we would love to have your help in actually
Yeah.
measuring it. And here are some ideas. And actually, I've
Right.
had this idea for a really long time. And I trust that at some point, the environment and situation will manifest for it.
Yeah.
But ever since I started to teach staff trainings in the probation departments in California, I've had this vision of teaching the people in prison how to cook Ayurveda food and to actually feed that to all the people there, because then you
Mhm.
can actually do a controlled study about the
Yeah.
impact of this pure, organic, healthy, inexpensive food for the levels of violence and behavioral issues that go on inside of
Mhm.
the detention centers. So I
Yeah.
just think that would be a cool, way to build a body of evidence that can be controlled, because that's
Exactly.
part of the difficulty, right? Is that if you teach someone, they can always stray off the path. They can
Right.
like, be like, oh yeah, 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 I'll do it. And they
Right.
don't know if they really did it or not. But only when
Yeah.
you can get a true like controlled experiment can you really be able to give the sort of data that will help to allow people to understand and assimilate this. We did do
Mhm.
surveys in our first couple of programs in Stanford and at the Alameda County Probation. And I feel like I should just, keep trying to do those as I
Yeah.
programs to go forward, not because I believe in the fact that they need to be validated. I've already validated them in the laboratory
Sure.
my whole life, and I've had
Yeah.
people do the same. But I, again, like through the lens of compassion, understand that for some people who are living with a lot of fear and for whom this is very new and very foreign, that numerical data is comforting and it will help them to
Right.
make better choices for themselves. So I'm open to it, but I don't believe it's my mission to like do that.
Right.
I just feel like I need to pull that in somehow to the work that we're already doing.
Well, I think what's so beautiful about what you're sharing is that, and this is something I've admired about you and something I've learned from you, is there's a gap between knowing how things are, you know, the truth of these ancient practices that you're continuing through your practice and through your work, but also not being attached to a particular outcome, right?
Mm,
So oftentimes when it comes to that, cultural appropriation and commodification conversation, there's like an identification with these practices and how they ought to be,
yeah,
versus like that gap of like, oh, this is, just because someone is misusing them, it doesn't change the practices,
yeah,
right? If someone is misprojecting them out in the world, that doesn't change the truth of the practice, right? Um, and that's something that I've kind of seen over and over again. And the other thing that you said that was really beautiful is, when we point to others, there are three fingers pointing back at us, and here I think something that that's really important for all of us to understand is not just the intent and motive of our actions, but also the impact of our actions. So you've
mhm,
mentioned this idea of karma a few times, right? So I'd
mhm.
love to kind of learn more about that from you and how it relates to this idea of bias itself.
Sure, yeah. The law of karma. It's my obsession in life. Once you learn the law of karma, you can never forget it. You can
Yeah,
never let it go. You can never stop being aware that it's constantly there. The only judge in this universe is the law of karma.
it's justice. Basically, law of karma is, as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. For me, I was like, oh, he was talking about karma.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. It's so
Yeah.
true because it's not personal.
Yeah.
Nothing is personal, but everything we have to take responsibility for. I think the law of karma is so sobering. It's so it's difficult when you don't accept it. It's difficult when you don't take responsibility. It's difficult when you resist it. When you accept it, when you take the responsibility, when you constantly evaluate everything you're going to say, think, and do according to it and what you are looking to get back
Yeah.
as a way of recalibrating everything. And
Yeah.
the biggest thing for me, I think, Anu, is it makes me more quiet. And
Mm.
over the years, I've come to really, really embrace the power of silence to connect speech to something deeper that comes through the space of contemplation that silence allows for.
Mm.
Because our words have such power,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's really true. And that's why I think for me, the Prism Toolkit, which is rooted in practices of contemplation, the contemplative sciences, is so powerful in transforming and rewiring our brains to move away from this, myth, this delusion of separation that we're so stuck in around our color or gender or sexuality, but ultimately realizing those primary identities that you talked about, the six senses that we have, you know, as human beings, sense of sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing, and even thoughts, thinking. Um, and yet these projections we, basically place on ourselves and others really limit our potential.
They do. You really
Totally.
do.
Yeah, and the potential of who we could be. Um,
And I think that is a process that takes time to decondition the mind. We have to constantly expose it to this knowledge, right? So no matter how much we hear it, no matter how much we try to practice it, we can never stop on that journey. We have
yeah,
to keep listening to it because what they say in the ancient Vedic spiritual tradition is that the knowledge of spirituality is a Shruti tradition, which means it's a heard tradition. So it comes through the ears. It's an oral
yeah,
tradition. And the
yeah,
ears are the subtlest of the five senses, right? Because the sound is something we can't see. We can't touch it. We can't taste it. We can't smell it. It goes beyond all of the senses. So it's very permeating. When the sound goes in, what we listen to will have a huge impact on our whole consciousness. So if
yeah,
we're constantly exposing ourselves to spiritual knowledge, which breaks down these wrong identifications that we have and teaches us what our true nature really is, we have to listen again and again to allow that knowledge to break down our preconceived notions that we've been fed or taught by parents or society or other
yes,
people who are uninformed, right? Who are
yeah,
ignorant of the true self. So I feel that because I've spent so many years now exposing myself to this very subtle knowledge and I keep feeding myself with it no matter how far I go in terms of maybe not being fully in the monastic lifestyle anymore, but
yeah.
I still need those reminders, and so I'm able to let go of a lot of biases because I've allowed that process of deconditioning to be an ongoing one. And it works its way slowly but surely.
And I think, for me, and I feel this to be true for my own life, is the more I accept myself and let
Yeah.
go of certain projections, ideas, and concepts that I have of myself, the more I'm able to accept others. right? It's like
Exactly.
this beautiful synergy of reciprocity that just takes place. Um,
Yeah, that's it, right? Because it's always us and us. That's
yeah,
what we learn in spirituality, right? They say the real jihad is really waged within. The war
yeah,
within is the greatest battle you'll ever fight. So if you want to
exactly.
know how to influence anyone else, just stop and look at yourself and figure out how to, love yourself more than you ever have before. And
Yeah,
that love can come in unexpected forms. A lot of people don't think
yeah,
discipline is love, and yet it's the greatest love when we can really, you know, give ourselves that opportunity to practice going beyond our normal habits that cause us suffering, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, there's this beautiful verse that I always think of that says, what is like nectar in the beginning becomes like poison in the end.
yeah.
Like poison in the beginning becomes like nectar.
Victor in the end. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes from the Gita, actually. So thank you for sharing that. And it's just a reminder that things are impermanent, right? And
Yeah.
projections we place on them can turn so quickly. Um, but the truth of, our essence is eternal. And I think, one thing that came up for me, and I'd love for you to comment on this, is for the law of karma, it's, in the Buddhist tradition at least, which is very Vedic. I know that people think they're two separate ones, but literally when I listened to the Gita and I studied Buddha and practiced Buddhism, I'm like, they're actually talking the same thing, and they were all contemporaries. And the Buddha himself was, steeped in the Vedic tradition himself. What I think is that he systematized it in a way that could be more comprehensible by the masses.
Mhm.
Um, but regardless of that, um, karma isn't imponderable, because if we sit and contemplate on the karma, basically for a very long time, we would go crazy
Yeah.
because our human mind just cannot perceive it.
Yeah.
And one thing that, I think I've learned, and there's so many dimensions to karma, is that it really begins at the level of intention.
Mhm.
And for me, the simplest way to really frame that intention, thought, words, and deeds, rooted in love, you know, in Sanskrit, prem, right? It's simple as that, karuna, right? Compassion or something like that. Um, yeah, would love to hear your reflection on that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like with regards to the law of karma, it's really, it's just making us radically responsible. And I feel like that is something that we might resist initially. That, oh, like all the bad things that happen to me, I'm responsible for. Like, like I've gone through that where I've been
Mhm.
made to feel responsible for all the bad things that have happened to me. And that's really damaging psychologically. But at the same time, when I learned about the law of karma and that whatever is happening is something somewhere I have created, even if it's not in this particular lifetime, that also means that what is to come is in the power of my creation.
Yes, I'm in charge of the present. I can't change the past. I may not know the future, but I'm in charge of the present. And if, I lead my thoughts, words, and actions rooted in the wholesome, right? The skillful,
Yeah,
in compassion and empathy, in love and curiosity, in joy, what's to come will result from those seeds.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, because there can be a desire in spiritual seekers to
Yeah.
realize the self, right? To get that enlightenment, to have the liberation, and it can become an obsession, right? So any desire will lead us away from our true nature. It's said in Swami Parthasarathi, one of the wonderful teachers I study with still, has said that a human being minus desires equals God or the divine,
Yeah.
and God plus desires equals a human being. And so the fastest route to going back to our true nature is to simply let go of the
Mhm.
desires, right? And if we can't do that, then a more practical way is to simply lessen the quantity and increase the quality of those desires, and
Yeah.
to, keep doing certain actions though that are simply for not getting any karma back, right? Because when we act like nature, when we are doing things because they are simply what we discern we ought to do because we're able to do it, it's in our, capacity to do it, then those actions protect us from having to
Mhm.
receive back any consequence of an action. Because even the positive, nice, good things we do for people, they still come back. Because if there was a desire somewhere, that desire itself is what causes karma to keep on manifesting and growing and multiplying. But, sometimes we can get perfectionistic with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a spiritual seeker, I want this, and how do I get it? And I need it. And, that whole thing, that desire gets pointed in that direction. And there's a kind of suffering because you have the desire. Whereas if you've burned a lot of things and your
Yeah.
only desire is really for that, even if you don't get it, but you're truly on this path of, purification of the desires and having higher quality and lesser quantity, then whatever is to come
Yeah.
is going to be so much better that there's no
Mhm.
need to fear, right? Or like be like, oh,
Mhm.
what if I don't reach my goal in this lifetime? It's like, well, you're going to have a much better lifetime the next time, and you'll be
Yeah.
further along your goal in the next one, So even though that's my thing, like I'm here
Yeah.
for liberation, I'm not so worried or obsessed about it. I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm following the path. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm open to learning the lessons. My goal is liberation. I point all my thoughts, words, and actions towards that. And I keep on letting go and, being like nature. But hey, if I have to come back, I feel very assured it's going to be a much better ride.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, right? To have the comfort of deep time, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, even writing the book, that's kind of the lens I took, looking at some of these identities, these biases that we have based on gender or race or sexuality or age, like, oh, these hierarchies that are really in our minds, projected outwards, are quite recent phenomenon, and they are transient when it comes to thinking about the existence of our species and the existence of our earth, right? Um, and it's really up to us, like you said, um, to change them. And what's really beautiful about what I heard from you is that all of those things are contingent upon certain causes and conditions,
Mhm.
right? And for me, that was the big aha moment. I was at a meditation retreat over a decade ago, and I saw that, oh, like for me personally, if I plant certain seeds, in my thoughts, words, and deeds, those seeds will sprout because those are the causes and conditions that will sprout in the future. But just like that, socially, environmentally, politically, economically, result of trillions and trillions of causes and conditions. And those will still sprout, and we can continue to sprout other ones like you're doing with the ancient way and really bringing these teachings to the modern world to different audiences. So really we're planting seeds, right?
Yeah, that's how I like to think of it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I know you have I mean, I can talk to you forever as we have. Um, but I'd love for you to share a practice that you have for us. And also then give us a little bit of context for it, because I think it's, for me, like I wrote the book really rooted in this idea of animism.
Mhm.
And, when I think about animism, I was like, oh, that's how I grew up, because we really follow, in India at least, we followed the rhythms of nature, of different,
Yeah,
seasons. And there were so many markers in our day to day life to interact with, you know, different types of animals and birds, and particularly trees. Trees are incredibly sacred, uh,
yeah,
because we really acknowledge the sentience in every living being and even non-living beings, right? There are so many, like rice to, like, little tikas that they have with red powder to cardamoms. All of these things have, you know vibrating with energy of some sort. So that sacredness was so omnipresent, and I feel like this practice you're about to share with us kind of was a reminder for me, because I witnessed my grandma doing it on a daily basis growing up.
Oh, that's so amazing. I love that. I never heard someone say that they have one of their relatives doing this. It's not super common. It's a practice called Sandhya Vandanam in Sanskrit. And what that means in English is basically a prayer of thanksgiving. And it's basically a way of connecting with the five great elements that allows us to cleanse and purify any kind of karma that we wish to cleanse from our being. So, in the lens of breaking biases, this would be a great place to actually acknowledge any judgments that are coming up in our mind towards someone else, towards ourselves, any kind of internalized scripts, or oppression or anything, right? Because before we can address it outside, we have to address it inside. So this is a great place to even let go of excessive of anything, right? Excessive fear, excessive anger, excessive worry, excessive obsession, excessive fear, excessive shame. Like all those things are just passing states. But when they get to be excessive, then we need a way to let go, right? And to release them. And I love this practice because it is tangible. I think sometimes when we're so in our heads, it really helps to come into our body. And sometimes having a physical practice, which is very simple and easy to do, it's also very grounding and stabilizing to have this connection with the elements. So this is something that we're usually recommended to do ideally early in the morning or at the time of dawn or dusk, because that's when the sky is changing colors and our minds are always more vulnerable during times of transition, whether that be from day to night, from night to day, or from the transitions that we go through in life of loss, of change, of moving, of letting go, of betrayal and judgment and just the unexpected, right? Disease so comes in. These are all transitions that we go through in life. And this practice is meant to help us find our connection with that which is beyond time, which is beyond space, which is beyond anything. And that is basically our true self or our soul that goes beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the judgments, beyond the intellect. And when we connect with our soul power in the face of any obstacle, difficulty, or challenge, we are going to really feel a lot more grounded and stable and empowered in the face of all kinds of outer afflictions, challenges, and inner and outer obstacles.
Yeah. So powerful.
Yeah, this one's been a game changer for me many times on my spiritual journey, so I love it. Normally, that we would do it in a copper vessel per the ancient tradition, although you can do it in any small vessel that you can keep water in. I don't have water in it right now because I have spilled water on computers and them in the past, and I would really love to finish our interview and keep my
Yes.
computer. Not for the sake of attachment, right? But simply this is what I feel I ought to do.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful.
There's no water in here. Imagine that there is.
Yes.
So what we would do, if you want to do it as the traditional practice, is to fill this vessel with water. And then ideally, to connect with the elements, what you would do is, if you can, go outside or even go by a window when the sun is beginning to rise or just before the sun has risen. And you can offer this water to the sun. And if you have a balcony where there's grass outside, you can actually pour the water to the earth. And it's water, earth, the sky, the air, the sound. So it's connecting all of the senses. Fire is the sun. And so it's a sun worship ritual, but it's really connecting with the light of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And the light of purification and of remembering our true nature. And then another thing that you can do with it, I'm teaching a very simplified version. There's actually many steps to it, as you must have
Yeah.
seen your grandma doing, and there's a lot of mantras that you can do with it. But the very, very simplified yet very powerful version of this is that you can actually pour water from this vessel into your hand. And then you just take a moment, and with the water in your hand, so just a little bit of water, you can acknowledge that I let go of fear. And then you just let it go. And then you can acknowledge any judgment. I let go of this judgment of XYZ or of myself and let it go. And then if there's any shame that can come in, it's like consciously being with it, and then I let go of it.
Yeah.
And if there's just a lot of judgments, and then shame, same thing. Like 1 year I went through that, and I every day would just like let go of shame. It feels like nothing is happening, but if you keep it going, a lot of things can happen. And then I feel it's also very helpful to then bless all of your 5 senses and your hands and feet to go out into the world. And so the way you would do that is you would dip your fingers into the vessel, into the water, and then you would basically bless your head, to receive knowledge that is pure. And then may my eyes be blessed to see that which is auspicious. May my ears be blessed to hear that which is pure and uplifting and deconditioning all the biases and scripts that I've heard. And then may I consume food that will actually nourish me, that will, fill me with health and peace and vitality. And then the traditional kind of expression is, may the divine come into my speech, be uplifting to all beings. And then may my heart be pure and full of compassion. And then we will touch the stomach, like the navel, and affirm, and if people have had digestive issues or a lot of fear and anxiety, it lives right here.
Yeah.
So it's really connecting with the powerful place to connect and say, may my connection with myself be whole and strong. And then finally, it's you bless your hands and your arms and your legs and your feet. And then, you say, may my hands and feet be put to service of all. And then, you can move around in a circle with the water and pour the water in a circle. And that circle represents the cycle of karma and being free from that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my grandma doing that around a tulsi tree. At home. So yeah, it's so beautifully said. And I also love that, because the intention behind this practice is so pure, that this is, when done regularly, like it's a practice, we're really rewiring our brains and reminding ourselves to, purify our, 6 senses, 5 senses, and the remainder of our body. So that intention stays with us day in and day out. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. That's so powerful. As an embodied practice too, right? It requires all of us. It's not something that we're just sitting and thinking about. We're actually action.
Yeah, exactly. And if you learn the deeper steps involved too, which just takes a little more time and effort to explain, but it's actually like a full yogic practice with a pranayama breathing exercise built in. It's physical, it's psychological, it's spiritual. It's got mantras also, so there's sound vibrations that are a part of it. And at the same time, it only takes a few minutes. So that's the beauty.
Totally.
It takes longer to explain than it does to actually do it.
Yeah. And one thing I would add is that, folks can just use their own prayers if they have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you don't have to follow the ancient Vedic prayer scripts unless you want to, which are also quite powerful.
Yeah, totally. And I actually have this practice written about in my book, The Way of Goddess. So I wanted to get the rundown on that. Each of it's there.
I mean, I have both of your books. They're both so beautiful. The first one is on Ayurveda, which has so many delicious recipes, some of which I've tried to cook myself. They're not as good as they look, and I've of course eaten with you, but I did learn a lot about my own system. And then of course, The Way of the Goddess is such a powerful book to really remind us of the divine feminine that's within all of us, regardless of our genders. So thank you for these gifts to our world, and thank you for being Ananta. I just
Oh,
feel so grateful to know you and be on this journey with you.
oh, likewise. Thank you for your beautiful work. I loved reading your book, and I'm just always so happy to get to be with you in this journey of growth and consciousness and liberation. It's been beautiful to witness your evolution and also how
Mm,
authentically you've shared about that unfolding in your book as well.
mm, thank you.